Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And welcome to another episode of Big Decisions for Anfield Index, ladies and gents. The San Siro was glorious, wasn't it? Last Wednesday, or a couple of days, Tuesday even, get me days right there, a couple of days ago. Forest wasn't good on the Saturday. And now having gone back to the future, we look ahead to Saturday and the visit of Bournemouth, isn't it? There is a lot going on for Liverpool. And as normal, ladies and gents, we're walking through the topical bits, the big decisions that you have to make. So probably recognise my voice of Dave Davis coming to you from a glorious Edinburgh. I've actually had to pull the blinds down. And I'm not going to lie, I'm in quite a good mood because about 20 minutes before this pod, I had a mint magment. So if you don't like them, get it up your hoop. They are absolutely glorious ice cream. So what is on the docket today? Bournemouth, Saturday. What that will tell us. Quite a bit, maybe nothing, maybe a little bit. We'll be talking about how much. The midfield, is it options, real options, or is it just bodies, funnily enough? Do numbers make options? We'll be talking about that. The left wing, Gakpo or Diaz. There's something for Arne Slot to really think about this weekend, isn't there? A lot for Arne Slot to think about there, especially. Konate, brilliant. Sensational in the San Siro, sensational so far. We all know his injury record. What do you do this weekend? So that'll be on the docket to decide. Diogo Jota and Darwin Núñez. They're interlinked, it seems, the two talking point, the two number 9 options, except one's number 1 and one's clearly number 2. So which one do you lean towards? Should someone be getting a chance in regress of the other's form? Who knows? Jules, a little bit on Jules. We've got some educational bits which are good from the Up Boys today. So that is always great to point out. And Salah, contract length. And a sad story, a bit of abuse, really. So I want to leave that to the end because there's been some absolute nonsense at times. So I do want to get into that a little bit. So let's get into it. Bournemouth. How much will Bournemouth tell us? Now, in terms of the first thing is rotation. The reason I say rotation is we actually got a little bit at the San Siro, didn't we? With Kostas Tsimikas and Cody Gakpo coming in. Will they stay the same? Will they stay in for Bournemouth? Will they go out? Because especially in that defence, largely, you say Tsimikas there, but that midfield especially, ladies and gents, that midfield's unchanged. So we'll talk about that a little bit. If Diaz comes back in, is there a clear first team and just the rest, just as and when it suits? Because if it's an unchanged team or maybe 1 or 2 changes for Bournemouth, that is telling us a lot. I think so anyway. I think it's quite, if it stays the same for Bournemouth, because that's our first experience of 3 games in a week, isn't it? We'll have gone Forest on the Saturday, San Siro on the Tuesday, and back again a week later to play Bournemouth at Anfield. 3 games in a week. If certain players, or a majority, I think it's fair to say, the majority of players are starting all 3 games, what does that really tell you about rotation? Does Slot actually fancy rotation at all? Is there a clear first 11 and then the alternates? I.e., how many are really options and how many are just basically, mate, you're there to give certain players a rest? An interesting one, isn't it? And I know people will come onto the Carabao Cup and talk about that, but maybe that will add to the tale as well. Because if it's a completely different 11 for the Carabao, maybe it's telling you, yes, you are in the B team like they used to at school almost, a little bit as well. So it will be fascinating to see. It really will. I think Bournemouth will tell us a lot. The second thing is Bournemouth are not Nottingham Forest, just to be clear, in terms of name, location, blah, blah, blah. We know that. But in the style of football, Iraola is a different manager to Nuno. They set themselves up differently. Probably Forest had a game plan. It's not the most attractive football, but that is not a dig. They had a game plan. They stuck to it well. They fought for everything. They deserve what they got on Saturday. You cannot take that away from them. Bournemouth are a different team in terms of the way they press, the way they advance the ball. Probably better technical players, less. It's generalising a bit here, but if you look at the stats overall, as I have done before, less physical. It's fair to say. At the same time, one thing I suspect they'll share in common for this, Bournemouth, I suspect, will set up with a low block. Okay, I've seen people say, "Oh, Bournemouth will just, they'll go for us, they'll come out." I don't see that. This is too strong to say this, and we've talked about this on a number of pods, and I know a number of people have. There isn't a blueprint, that is incorrect to say, to beat Liverpool, but other teams will have looked at that Forest victory, and they'll have looked at elements of, should we pack the midfield? Should we absolutely pack it and cut off the passing lanes, force it wide? Will that be successful? Do we play for second balls a lot? And, bank on the numbers in that midfield. Now, not everyone has a Chris Wood, etc., or play that style, don't get me wrong, but we will see what teams do. And the reason, and I talk about other teams, it's about us. Bournemouth will tell us, have we learned some lessons from last weekend against Forest? Will there, if it's not going our way, will there be any rash decisions? We don't know. This is a bit like crystal ball time, Mystic Meg, I know. But Bournemouth, for me, will tell us quite a few things in terms of selection, lessons learned. Is the Roberts the first and second option for the team? And we will go from there. Have a think, though. That would be the first big decision. How much do you believe Bournemouth will tell us this weekend? And I kind of alluded to an area that I think we've got to get stuck into, because it's an area that is staying the same. I'm deadly serious on that. It's an area that is the same three are starting all the time. Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai. They have started all the games. There has been no real changes there. Yes, they've come off at times, but it's clearly more just a rest. I mean, think about it. McAllister, what was it, the last few seconds? I think he came off for endo, so that's not a real sub. And I get it. I mean, especially in the San Siro, you take out the Forest game, pretty good, eh? I mean, Gravenberch, you look at 6 interceptions, 7 recoveries, his tackles, the way he played against Milan. Even Szoboszlai got a great goal, didn't he? He's got an assist this season, pressing like an absolute demon in that game. Not always great with the pass, but such an important part of leading that press. Even McAllister, who's going on almost unheralded, isn't he? Even in that game, he wins both his tackles, makes the most passes into the final third with 11. All 3 midfielders have had a very strong start to the season. Ryan Gravenberch as well is picking up Man of the Match awards in the San Siro. That shows just how far he's come. You kind of take the Forest game as a blip, but that looks great. Those 3 look great. Could be better at times, but it's a good start. You have to factor it under that. Then you talk about the rest. Tyler Borton's not played. Now, you can argue he was lower on down on the list, kept to his insurance. I get it. But the big decision is, in midfield, do we have real options or do we have bodies? Endo, injury time at the San Siro. We also know quite clearly Slot doesn't fancy him. We've seen it through the various outlets this summer. They talked about selling it. We know all this. He's quite clearly not a Arne Slot number 6. So there's that. Curtis Jones, you could argue, had injuries, came back, then came on against Forest, but didn't see a single minute in the San Siro. And that was as it went later. And, the other 3 were starting to look a bit tired. I know the up guys referred to it as garbage time. I think we started to lose a bit of control in those minutes. It could have gone a different way. But still, Curtis Jones doesn't come on the pitch. So he's in low minutes this season. Harvey Elliott is the other one as well, isn't he? That very much is a case of, you have to take Slotter's word, you have to, has said he would have got minutes if he hadn't injuries. He talked about that in last Friday's press conference just gone. So I suppose it's that question. Midfield, this is the big decision. Is it bodies or is it real options? It's funny, isn't it, today? Because we've seen all the Zuba-Mendy rumours, haven't we? We saw, God bless Indy Callier, saying about how he regrets it. Then there were stories, wasn't there, even coming from Spain, and now it seems to have been rubbish via Dave O.C. Cop, to be fair, and a Realm Sociedad source. It is just not. Time will tell on that one. I suppose it depends who you want to believe a little bit as well. But you do wonder how many of these midfielders does Slot actually fancy? The starting three, no doubt he fancies those. Does he fancy Elliott that much? Before people go, of course he would have, and I get that. I suspect he would have got minutes. He hasn't really rotated in or played much, has he? Before that. So that seems generous. Second thing to think about, look at all the others. Curtis Jones, injury. Endo clear doesn't fancy. Tyler Morton. And if these guys play in the Carabao, that does not mean they're real options for him. It could well just mean they're alternates. That comes back to how much Bournemouth will tell us. Be honest, do you expect him to name the same three in the midfield again? I do. I genuinely think it'll be the same three again. The only worry is we do seem sort of super reliant on these three, and it's quite clear they are the first choice. Touch wood, and obviously everything's going well, but you just wonder if one of them gets a knock. He's then almost playing a player that you feel, does he really, really want to play them? Who knows? So that's one of the big decisions to make as well. The midfield, ladies and gents, is it real options or is it just bodies? You will make your call on that. Tell you what, speaking of, first team, second team, however you want to see it, Cody Gakpo. What a performance in the San Siro. Has Cody Gakpo given Arne Slot the biggest decision to make this weekend? Cody Gakpo on the left or Luis Diaz? I mean, it's almost when he got that whack and that yellow card and he was rolling about a lot, he hadn't really woken up. And you do wonder for like the goal they conceded. We talked about Forest. Was he physical enough? It just seemed that tackle, if you want to call it that, brought him to life. I mean, more touches than anyone in their opposition box. 8, won the most duels, and that's 7 because a lot of it's obviously take-ons that way as well, which he completed 4 of, more than any other player against Milan. And obviously he gets that assist, doesn't he, where he sucks Pavlovic in and then he bursts forward that way. So you think about that. I mean, a really, really strong start in that game, and evidence, you could say, for Cody Gakpo. So that's one bit to look at. Would you then start him here? This is hard. Because Luis Diaz would argue, well, in 5 games so far, I've got 3 goals and 1 assist. So he's got 4 goal contributions already this season, just behind Mo Salah. So no one else in the attacking line. He'll also could argue about Forest, and listen, if you could drop everyone based if you're just on Forest, but he didn't do that. Think about what he did for the San Siro to follow up. I find this really, really tough. Now, Gakpo has only 1 assist, you can argue, but if you look at his minutes, 150 in all competitions. He's not even played the equivalent of 2 games yet, has he? So how are you going to really level that against him? Also, how do you see it? If it's the traditional, the player is informed, keeps the shirt, why would you take out Cody Gakpo? He was brilliant, wasn't he? Absolutely brilliant against AC Milan. You can't argue anything different at all. This, I think, is the biggest decision probably of this weekend for me. Are you a Luis Diaz or are you a Cody Gakpo man? It's really hard to decide. I know there'll be a lot of Gakpo's done enough. I know there'll be a lot of Luis Diaz has had a good season so far. Keep that streak going that way and a different... I don't know. Really don't know. Swithering on that myself, and ahhing. So you will make your call on that, ladies and gents. Gakpo or Diaz? for this weekend. Now, a player that I wouldn't say surprise is too strong. That is too strong. Maybe the surprise is how much he's played so far, because again, Ibou Konate, another one, absolutely sensational in the San Siro. No two ways about it. Sensational. It's a brilliant header. It's a great leap, as Dominic Szoboszlai termed it, like a Michael Jordan-esque that way. Made great blocks. Nobbled Rafa Leao at one stage, which was enjoyable, wasn't he? When he was on his run, gave us a bit of the get out of the way with the shoulder type of job. But also, one of the absolute key reasons why we've been keeping clean sheets. Let's be, one of the key reasons why we've been keeping clean sheets. Ever since he came on in the second half against Ipswich, been brilliant. I mean, it is interesting, though, because he has played a lot of the minutes, but not all of them. He had only played a half 45 in that Ipswich game, and he came off with 15 to go against Forest. It's never ability with Konate. Is anyone else slightly concerned? You might not be, around how many games he is playing, Ibou Konate. Now, there's a couple of things to call out on this. That last season, he played his highest ever number of games for Liverpool in the time he's been here. So that's something to consider. It's getting bigger. And a quick scan here on Transfer Market shows that if you look back to last season, there was 2 periods. There was a muscle injury from August to September, which was 20 days. And there was a thigh problem from March the 7th through to March the 19th, so later in the season. So he missed 8 games last season. This season, he's played in all of them. Ever since he's come on, as we know. Yeah, against Ipswich, not quite of a present because there was a 15 minutes there, but again, 90 minutes in the San Siro. I said this, and a few other people have. Which game is Ibou going to be rested for of these 3 in a week when we start? Because he can't play 3 games a week. I wonder if he might, though. It wouldn't. I think most people could be wrong on this. This is your big decision. Would you lean to starting Ibou against Bournemouth? Ibou Konate, with his injury record, going 3 starts in a week. Would you do that? If he does do that, what does that say for the difference between Slot and Klopp's methods? I feel like quite a big statement in a different way, because we know all the knocks, the strains, the muscle problems that Ibou's had in his time so far. Imagine if Arne Slot had him playing in the first 6 games. Not quite start, because of Ipswich, as we know, but the most of the minutes as well. But 3 starts in a week. Do we think is our big decision that is the right thing? Completely correct for Ibou Konate? I don't know, ladies and gents. I really don't know. It wouldn't surprise me now at all, though. So we will see. And if it does happen, if he does keep Quanta out the team, let's just hope it's a non-discussion point afterwards. Let me just be clear on that. No one's trying to be right or wrong. We want all our players fit. We want to win every game 67-0. Zero doubts about that. But yeah, Ibou 3 a week. That could be your big decision, ladies and gents, for this one. So that's a bit of midfield. That's a bit of the left wing. That's a bit of the centre-back situation. The other one, really, which is the big decision to make, is your forwards. I mean, Diogo Jota has started every single game, hasn't he? I think there's been a bit of a revisionism around Jota and what I'm seeing, because everyone says, oh, he's really struggling. Well, he got a goal and was great against Ipswich. Probably could have had another header, could have had 2 goals. Gets the assist against Brentford, plays quite well. Even against United, yes, he doesn't get a goal and assist, but had a real impact in terms of pressing. Just showed his game intelligence at times as well, didn't he? Where he guides sort of Diaz for the first goal to go by the back, split the defenders that way. So there is intelligence there, no 2 ways about it. However, the last 2 have really not been good, have they? Forest, a 54% pass completion. I mean, you saw it. It almost felt at times, and this sounds harsh, but it's just true. You know, you have to be consistent on these things. He couldn't even trap a bag of cement, could he? It was bouncing off him, going under his foot, and he missed a good chance where I think he should have headed it. And that's also when you say, you know, Jota the Slaughter, it's not quite ringing true these last few games. It doesn't mean he's a bad player at all. Please don't get me wrong on this. I think the thing we've always thought for a lot of people, and the stats bear this out, he's a streaky player, isn't he, Jota? He goes on a run, but he's also had periods where, and injuries have played a part because he's sometimes covering back, but he does go big periods if you look at his Liverpool career without scoring as well. So that's another side. I mean, he's brought off consistently. If you look at the league games, he's not played 90 minutes at all. If you look at AC Milan, he's not played 90 minutes whatsoever. He's always brought off, and that's where Darwin Núñez comes in at the same time. But if you think about what Jota's done so far, Jota in terms of pure minutes across every single competition, what are you looking at as a look here? You are looking at 355. It's the majority. Then you come to Darwin Núñez, who has been a substitute in every single game and is a massive talking point for a lot of Liverpool fans in terms of, does Slot fancy him? I think this is a really fair question to ask, because you think of Jota's performance against Forest and he still starts ahead of Núñez. Jota, in this game, misses a great chance, doesn't he? Do you remember that one where McAllister squares it left and you think he's just going to open up, even go through the keeper's legs, you fancy him, but it just misses the target completely. Now, in terms of consistency, and it's important to say this, if it was Núñez, he would have been lambasted. You have to be consistent with these things. It can't be just as unlucky. Núñez is you have to be consistent with your framing of it. So Jota the Slaughter is really not firing, it's fair to say, at this moment in time. It doesn't mean he's a bad player. It doesn't mean it would surprise you if he starts and then scores against Bournemouth. But it does then bring you to, does Núñez deserve a chance? Now, if you look at Núñez's minutes so far, people say he's played every game. He's played 84 minutes in total across all of them. So how the hell is a player that's played 84 minutes in total across all these competitions supposed to have any real rhythm? He did okay, I thought, when he came up. He did one where, do you remember, he nicked it ahead of the keeper, got a shot, and the keeper almost saved it with his arse cheek, didn't he, a little bit? Could have easily bounced in. Looked lively, again, in a game where I thought we played well, but Jota really didn't again. So, yeah, if Núñez doesn't start against Bournemouth, what does that mean for you? What's your big decision on that? I mean, for me, it would suggest that Slot really doesn't fancy it. And starting in the Carabao almost, if it's Jota 3 starts a week and Núñez in the Carabao, I do think that tells a massive story. Really, really do, personally. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see. It really, really will be. But you will all make up your mind on what selection means if you attach importance to that as well. One other thing in terms of big decisions is, there's been alluded to this, is the physicality. Is there enough physicality in the team for all the ball players? How do we do in duels? That's been a theme this season. Arne Slot mentioned it, didn't he? As the reason for Konate coming on to replace Quansah against Ipswich. It's been referenced before in certain games. And even if you look, Sam Maguire did a piece for his Patron in terms of duels. It was a great article, really is. And it kind of mentions about, we won just 46% of ground duels and 42% of aerial duels. Now, a ground duel is a bit more complicated because there's a lot of things that go into that, such as a straight 50-50, a dribble, an attempted take on. So you'll have more of those from your attackers, won't you? So it's not just a straightforward, like, draw a pistol and fight and shoot, or stab with that foil thing they do at the Olympics, etc., where they all go mad and the judge gives a point to someone and no one really understands what's gone on. It's not one of those, but The stats aren't that high. Aerially as well. It's interesting, isn't that? 42% of their aerial duels, which is funny because Konate won 75 and he's standing at this season at 87.5, Van Dijk at 75, which is the second highest. Then we got the first and second highest in the Premier League so far. And you think the reason I'm mentioning those is, in terms of aerially, well, they score set pieces, don't they? Great leap. So maybe tells you that the others are not doing that well in the air at the moment. The ground duels are a bit more complicated. For me, the big decision on this is, I don't think it's anything to write home or absolutely panic against yet, which Sam Maguire does make crystal clear in his article at the same time, and it's well worth a read on his Patron. But it is one to keep an eye on. And the Up Boys sent some great things through on this, so a bit of a shout out to Dan Kennett, if anyone's seen it, the details on Discord. There's quite a lot goes into that. As I say, don't just think about it as, a ball's put in the middle like you used to do at training under 12s and you kick it first, a drop ball situation. There's take-ons, we've got all sorts of things go into that. So, yeah, worth being aware of, but one to keep an eye on. And the final thing on your big decisions this week, ladies and gents, Salah, the contract, the story, and the length. Now, I did Media Matters, as we do every Monday with David Lynch, and people will know, a guy I like, I've got great respect for. You don't always agree with people's opinions, but that's the point of football, isn't it? You respect and you listen to. And he made, for me, a very lucid case in terms of the potential, and people are going to jump on this and not listen again, I know, but I'm going to say it, sod it. 3 years for Salah being too much in terms of the possible impact. He referenced Ronaldo at United, and there's no guarantees for the future. So there's a couple of things with this. People disagreed. Some people disagreed with logic and rationale. Bit of a shout out to Backseat Barryman, because they had you're making his name wrong, aren't I? Brand Barry. What am I even calling him? So he had a back and forth in a healthy way, healthy discord, as I would call it, with David Lynch about it. And, points shared and discussed. Logical. Good to see. So that's the first thing. The second part is some people just sent all sorts of abuse and said all sort of unfortunately, you are reminded occasionally with Twitter of what's wrong with it, and just people saying and abusing people foolishly. You do not have to agree with a football opinion. You won't agree with everything I said. You won't agree with everything David Lynch said. Absolutely fine. Variety is the spice of life. Opinions are like what we know. Yeah, so that's absolutely fine. But just think of the way you express it, and why you're abusing. Honestly, you've got time to abuse people online. It says more about you than anything else. So that's the second big point. The third big point, and again, it links back to you're all entitled to your opinions. And I saw some valid arguments about, this is what I'd said on one of the pods before. What about 2 years plus an option again? So we don't know what can be agreed at. I know all that's part of the context, but 2 years an option based on if he performs a certain way. A lot of people like 2 years. I think David Lynch said that would be his optimum as well, without putting words in people's mouth. So you can see it different ways. By the way, we did a poll on Anfield Index to try and get everyone's take. Around 2,000 people voted or put comments, or voted altogether. 64% said 2 years. So make it make sense that people are abusing David Lynch for whether you agree with it or not, an opinion, but a lucid, a clear thought on you can disagree with it. That's absolutely fine about, the elements of, are we overpaying for him? Do you think it's worth the risk? Those were the key points, the nuts and bolts. But most of you seem to agree with him. So what does that mean? Honestly, it does mystify me a little bit. The percentages back it up. Maybe. Do you know what? Maybe part of the big decision is 64% kind of agreed, and the other 36, some of them don't know how to behave or act like adults a little bit. Who knows? But yeah, it's important we call that out. The one thing, and I know Gags and Eddie have been huge on this at Anfield Index, they're so big on people having a right to have an opinion. agree with it or not, but people all being able to have their say. Maybe people who wouldn't be given a chance normally to get their views heard and share their thoughts and opinions. I know that's a big crux of why they do it. What I know they're also big on is don't abuse people personally. If you don't, you will go to the games with your mates like I do. I think some of my good mates I go to the games with spout absolute wham. Honestly, you should hear the Red Alert boys, Jamesy and Mark. I think they talk nonsense at times, but they're still my mates. Still want to go to the games with them. They will say the same about me. That's healthy discord. You chat and you disagree. Abusing people, though, folks. Honestly, what the is wrong with some of you? And if you didn't, well, have thick skin. It's not about you, isn't it? But yeah, the Salah one's just funny. Probably the big decision is A, how wrong do you think you should get? And B, if you think there's any point in personal abuse, then, just drop me out of everything going forward. But yeah, it's an excitable week, isn't it, ladies and gents? This is the final big decision. That Forest, is it a blip or is it something to watch out for? Only time will maybe tell on that, but we liked all the signs we got in the San Siro. There was almost an element of maybe just the fact that we went one down early. The ghost of Forest came back a little bit, and you could see the talk of Slot mentioned this afterwards. We're going behind. Is it going to be one of those? We've not started well again. But they turned it around. There was so many positives to take from that. Let's just hope it is a blip. Bournemouth may be a more indicative test of that in a way, isn't it, than Milan in the San Siro because of the nature of the opposition, how we suspect they'll set up. But only for me, time will tell on that. Let's just hope it's another 3 points. And then essentially, City and Arsenal can hopefully get 24 players sent off at the weekend through various things and ruckuses. But we will have to see, ladies and gents. But there we go. On Thursday, the 19th of September, the Reds are back on course. Midfield decisions, centre-back decisions, who's your number 9 decisions, don't abuse people decisions, and let's be happy decisions. So for Anfield Index, that was another big decisions.